9 climbers found dead, half naked, disfigured, and radioactive.
I don't think they died where they were found. I think their bodies were moved.
Demonic spirits from beyond the grave.
If you do something wrong, the stingray comes and takes your life.
And gruesome experiments to resurrect the dead.
All of a sudden his eyes flickered, and it seemed to everyone in the room that he was coming back to life.
These incredible stories come from all over the former Soviet Union, from times of fear and uncertainty.
You have speculation without facts, you have mystification and myth.
Concealed behind the Iron Curtain, these disturbing case files are now coming to light. With eyewitness testimony, declassified records, and expert insight, we can now uncover the truth behind Soviet Russia's unexplained mysteries. The former USSR was a place of strict controls and censorship. But since the fall of the Iron Curtain, case files of the unexplained have slowly started to emerge from deep within the Soviet archives. These files tell of bizarre phenomena, monstrous creatures, and sinister occurrences. One of the most intriguing and complex stories concerns what came to be known as the Dyatlov incident. A group of experienced young climbers hiking in the remote mountains are all found dead. Their tent is ripped open from the inside, their bodies scattered. Some are barefoot, one has no eyes, and 2 show signs of radiation. Around the time they died, some other hikers claimed to see strange lights over the mountain.
Half the people died of the cold and the other half died of horrific internal injuries. It just doesn't make any sense at all.
So what caused them to die? In January 1959, a group of 8 men and 2 women set off on a skiing expedition deep into the Ural Mountains. Yuri Kuntsevich was just 12 at the time.
The leader of the group was Igor Dyatlov. He was a very experienced alpinist. All of them were either studying at university or had already graduated. Only Zolotaryov was from another place.
Their goal is to climb a challenging peak called Mount Torton.
Mount Torton itself means don't go there. What they were doing demanded the highest levels of physical fitness.
To get to the mountains, the group set out from their university in Sverdlovsk, now known as Yekaterinburg, traveling 400 miles north into the snowy mountain wilderness.
They wrote in their journals about how great it was to be outdoors.
But the team soon lose one of their members. Arriving at an uninhabited settlement, Yuri Yudin falls ill.
The girls told him, "Yuri, you better go back home," because medical treatment was required.
It's a lovely picture, and that's Yuri basically saying goodbye, and it's the last time he's ever going to see them alive. Quite a poignant photo, really.
The remaining members continue their trek. Despite harsh conditions and difficult terrain, they make good progress. We know so much about what happened on the trip because the group's diaries and some of their rolls of film are later recovered.
The thing that really comes out to me is how happy they are. There's a lot of smiling, there's a lot of laughter.
Each night they huddle in their tent. They sing songs, accompanied by Rustem Slobodin on his mandolin. On the evening of Friday, January the 30th, Zina Kolmogorova writes in her diary,
"We are walking along the Auspia River, and at the end of the day, she adds this note that, today I believe we are going to build a food shed."
It is the last thing she will ever write. Something happens soon after that leads to the death of the whole group. That night, eyewitnesses some 30 miles away report strange lights in the sky over the mountains.
The spheres were moving at low speed, at different heights.
This is the last photograph on Igor Dyatlov's camera. It shows what some people think is evidence of the light orbs.
The photo could just be an artifact of the development process. This area of the Urals is famous for mysterious lights in the sky. These are often reported as UFOs. No one knows if the group sees the lights, as they don't survive long enough to write about it in their diaries. Soon, all will be dead. On the 12th of February, the team had planned to send a telegram saying they'd completed their trip. But no message comes. As the days roll on, still no word from the team. Following demands from family and friends, a large-scale search and rescue mission is launched. For 5 days, they find nothing. But then 2 student volunteers discover the first clues.
We got there by helicopter on the 23rd, and on the 25th, we managed to find the ski tracks.
Despite thick snow and sub-zero conditions, the rescuers are able to follow the ski tracks. The following morning, the tracks lead them to the group's tent.
The first thought we had was to find out whether or not there were any people inside.
They found it had collapsed. It wasn't immediately obvious that anybody was dead. They still expected to find them alive.
The tent is off the group's original planned route, and 9 miles from their destination, Mount Torten. It's found on the slopes of a completely different mountain, known to the locals as Horat Siakil, the Mountain of the Dead. What had taken them so far off course? Stranger still, the tent appears to be cut open from the inside.
They found all their warm clothes left inside the tent, and even their boots were left behind. It was very strange. To jump out of the tent without clothing in the winter is tantamount to suicide.
Something must have terrified them so much that they just ran.
So what sent them fleeing in terror? One obvious explanation is an avalanche. The deep rumble of approaching snow and rocks makes the team bolt from their tent in panic. An avalanche might explain the ripped tent, but there's no other evidence that such an event occurred.
Concerning the avalanche, I would like to tell you right off that it is absolutely a dead theory, because an avalanche can never occur on such a gentle slope.
The slope where they were has been measured at 18 to 20 degrees, which is well under a critical angle.
If not an avalanche, then clearly something terrifying must have made them run away, leaving all their clothes and equipment behind. If the hikers had no warm clothes, there's little hope that any of them will be found alive. Searching in the snowy wastes a mile from the tent, the rescue team's fears are soon realized.
They saw the bodies of two of the students powdered with snow. They were the bodies of Doroshenko and Krivonishenko.
Both bodies are lying side by side, dressed only in their underclothes.
They were barefoot, had bare hands.
There are no marks on the bodies, no visible external injuries. Had they just frozen to death? But fresh horrors await the rescue team at every turn. The next day, 2 more bodies are found.
Just a small distance away, probably about 300 meters, they found the body of the group leader, Igor Dyatlov. He'd frozen to death. And within a very short space of time, the body of Zina was found.
After days of desperate searching through brutally cold conditions, another body is found. That of Rustem Slobodin, the mandolin player. 5 of the 9 bodies are now recovered, yet none have any obvious injuries that could explain their deaths. The autopsy later records that all 5 climbers had died of hypothermia. It's possible they suffered something called paradoxical undressing. This is where people actually remove their clothes due to confusion and disorientation from hypothermia. But the local student rescuers believe someone else may have been involved in the deaths.
The way the bodies were laying suggests they were intentionally laid that way by somebody else. It was either some imitation or a frame-up.
They begin to question the official investigation. But when they voice their concerns, the Soviet authorities ignore them. Besides, the rescuers have more urgent matters at hand. For the time being, they still have 4 more students to find. Sifting through the official report, our modern-day investigators notice a number of peculiar findings from the campsite that just don't add up.
There were a number of items found at the tent which didn't belong to any members of the group. One was a ski pole. The other thing is a Chinese lantern.
The expedition had a detailed equipment inventory, and these items aren't on it. So where did they come from?
It implies that someone else had been there.
The tent itself adds to the mystery. Closer inspection by Keith of the photos taken by the students themselves, and then afterwards by the rescuers, suggests the tent was put up incorrectly.
It looked as if it was somebody who didn't really know what they were doing when they put the tent up, which is not what you would expect from somebody of Igor Dyatlov's caliber.
Keith's own observations appear to run counter to official findings. Who might have put up the tent the wrong way? On the 5th of May, 1959, 2 months after the first bodies were discovered, the 4 remaining bodies are found. They lie in a ravine just 75 yards from where the first students were located, but they're hidden by deep snow. Their discovery shocks the rescuers.
They all had terrible injuries. The traumas were so massive that they were comparable to being run over by a car.
There's a close-up of Luda's body, lying on what looks like a rock next to a stream. She was missing her tongue, and the cartilage of her nose had literally been flattened as if she'd been punched very hard in the face, and her whole nose had shattered under the impact.
Some of these injuries could have happened post-mortem in the 2 months since their deaths, perhaps as the result of animal scavenging. On closer inspection, more anomalies are revealed.
Instead of her shoes, Luda's feet were wrapped with pieces of clothing apparently taken from those students who died first.
Stranger still, her jumper is emitting radiation.
The investigation was led by a criminal investigator named Lev Ivanov. And during the investigation, he decided to check the level of radiation.
A Geiger counter is usually a military item, not a civilian one, but he'd obviously been instructed to check for radiation.
But the hikers were civilian mountaineers. Why would there be any radiation involved? In the wilderness of Russia's Ural Mountains, 9 climbers are found dead in mysterious circumstances. Their bodies are laid to rest back in their hometown of Sverdlovsk, now called Yekaterinburg, and a memorial erected in their memory. Not long after, the investigation is brought to a close. But in the late 1980s, a new investigation begins. With the advent of glasnost, President Gorbachev's policy of openness, many of the classified reports and artifacts are released to a memorial foundation set up in honor of the dead students. But even studying the official reports, Yuri believes there's a lot of information missing. Trying to uncover the underlying truth is not easy, particularly when the Russian military are involved.
We have constantly been facing administrative resistance. They prevent us from accessing the archives. They conceal some information from us.
For Keith McCloskey, the official report itself immediately raises suspicions.
The thing that strikes me immediately is the date on the cover. It's opened on the 6th of February 1959, which is 1 week before anybody would have known there was anything wrong.
Over the last few years, more and more details have come to light. But the incident is so bizarre, it's difficult to know what pieces may eventually solve the puzzle. Inquiries into the backgrounds of the group members suggest the answer may lie in espionage and a deadly clandestine rendezvous. Not all the climbers were still studying at university. One of the team, Alexander Kolyevatov, worked at a nuclear installation.
He was involved in the production of nuclear supplies and nuclear devices.
And the oldest member of the group, Semyon Zolotaryov, was himself a former army sergeant. Yuri has been searching for further clues.
According to our evidence, Zolotaryov was a member of some secret service. There is a hypothesis that he was a double agent.
There is talk that possibly the two of them were involved in some way with passing radioactive material to a foreign power.
According to this theory, once the exchange happens, the order is given to liquidate any witnesses. But Keith is not convinced.
It's a bit of a far-fetched theory, and why would anybody want to meet in the middle of the mountains when a street corner would probably be a lot easier? In
the years since, countless other theories have been suggested. The key to some is those lights in the sky. Some people believe the lights can only be one thing: UFOs.
Lev Ivanov was in charge of the investigation. He was a city policeman. To his dying day, he was convinced there was a UFO connection.
Other researchers think there's a more down-to-earth explanation. For them, the combination of lights and the specific injuries sustained by some of the group point towards some sort of military involvement.
The first thing I thought when I saw the autopsy was a blast of some kind had killed them all, and not a blast from a normal bomb, because there would be all sorts of other damage to the bodies from shrapnel or from earth.
Keith believes that a special type of bomb, called a parachute mine, was being tested in the mountains.
Usually 100 to 200 feet, it explodes, and it's the blast sort of destroys everything around it. Even if you're some distance away from it, your lungs will explode and your eardrums will shatter.
These bombs cause massive internal injuries, yet leave little external trace. Keith continues to pursue military sources and ex-military personnel for more information. He's convinced he's on the right track.
There's also evidence that 2 bombers flew over the northern Urals that night. There's testimony from a crewman of one of the aircraft that they dropped parachute mines over that area.
The most compelling evidence for this theory comes from a recent discovery made on the mountain.
Finally, we found a piece of a rocket last year.
It doesn't necessarily prove they died from whatever the bombers dropped, but it's a very likely candidate. It seems a hell of a coincidence.
It's possible the team of students are accidentally killed during a military test bombing operation. A case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the plot thickens further. After the group were killed, is it possible the Soviet military were then involved in a large-scale cover-up?
I don't think they died where they were found. I think they died somewhere else, probably at least a few miles away, and their bodies were moved.
There were people who wanted to cover up the murder. The only explanation they could come up with was hypothermia.
For some modern-day investigators, the mysterious findings at the campsite could also point to a possible cover-up. The team are experienced mountaineers, yet they are found off course on the wrong mountain. Even their tent isn't put up correctly.
The tent possibly had been moved with the bodies to divert attention from where a military accident had occurred.
50 years on, the case of the student's death still remains unresolved. No one theory can explain the whole mystery.
It's almost as if a committee had sat down and said, how can we make this so confusing that nobody will be able to follow any particular theory?
There is plenty of contradictory evidence that cannot be tied up in one single knot to make the situation explicable and understandable.
We don't even know what facts were reported and what were overlooked. As more files are released, more clues emerge.
It's not comfortable to point out lies. That's why we will continue until we get the real answers.
Stories have emerged from the former Soviet Union of terrifying, unexplained creatures. Most are unknown to science, and many are described as having supernatural powers.
People everywhere have a need for myth and for heroes, for mysteries. When you're living in such a huge country, that creates a lot of possibilities.
A file is unearthed, written by a famous Russian paleontologist and science fiction writer who claims it's based on a true story. It tells of a group of geologists who encounter a legendary creature known as the Mongolian death worm. Mongolia in the late 1940s, locked between the Soviet Union and Communist China, this remote country is firmly under the influence of the USSR. According to the story, the geologists are conducting a field survey out in the Gobi Desert. But their expedition is about to be cut short. Around their camp, something is moving. One of the men goes to investigate. His body lies convulsing, as if hit by a powerful electric shock. In a heartbeat, he's dead. The sand next to his body churns, and something emerges. The other geologists believe they have witnessed an attack by a legendary creature called Olhoi Horhoi, the Mongolian death worm. Mongolian folklore describes the beast as looking like a horse's intestine, able to spit lethal venom and produce powerful electric shocks. Anatomist Jeff Meldrum knows of other large worms.
If we look at the possibility of a large worm, there are some examples that come to mind in my home state of Idaho. The Palouse earthworm. Australia boasts one as well. The Gippsland worm is an impressive earthworm.
These Australian earthworms can grow up to 6 feet long, but no earthworms are known to be venomous or able to create an electric current.
There are certainly fish that are capable of generating a very potent electrical field. However, on land, both the generation of and the discharge would be a little more of a challenge.
For the time being, the Mongolian deathworm remains in the realm of folklore. But in the early 1990s, an attempt was made to actively find the creature. Czech cryptozoologist Ivan Macaulay has heard stories about the deathworm. As travel restrictions are lifted in the former Soviet-controlled Czechoslovakia, he organizes a series of expeditions. On his last trip, he takes his son Danny with him.
My father first became interested in Olhoi Horhoi when he heard from a Mongolian student that such an animal really exists in Mongolia. He was a bit surprised that everyone describes Olhoi Horhoi the same way. He concluded that there must be some truth in it.
Traveling from village to village, the team search for clues. But they are met with silence.
The local shepherds were not willing to talk. The old men, if they actually knew something about Olhoi Horhoi, were rarely willing to share their stories.
They even visit a shaman to seek further information. Instead, Ivan receives a stark warning.
The shaman told them that Olhoi Horhoi is not an animal made of flesh and blood, as it is usually described, but it is a demon of the desert. He said that toying with Olhoi Horhoi, or trying to find it, was dangerous and could be fatal.
Despite the shaman's warning, the team are undeterred. They even try to actively entice the creature to the surface.
Walking around Gobi, by hitting the ground, we hoped Olhoi Horhoi would react to the vibrations and crawl out.
With no success, Ivan turns his hand to explosives. These too prove ineffective. But then events take a strange and unexpected turn. Resting in the tent one day, Ivan has a bizarre dream.
My father dreamed that he was walking in the desert, and suddenly a huge worm crawled out of the sand, trying to attack him.
In his dream, Ivan tries to run, but can't move. He feels the beast on his back, biting into his flesh.
He screamed in pain, and then he woke up. "Why are you screaming?" And my father replied, "I just had a bad dream. I saw Olchoj Chorchoj and it attacked me, jumped on my back."
They discover a huge bruise on Ivan's side. It's possible he just slept on a rock, but his health soon deteriorates.
The next day, my father started to feel unwell. His heart started failing.
They recall the shaman's warning. Whoever disturbs the demon of the desert is at risk of death. Because of his unknown illness, Ivan is forced to abandon the expedition. He later makes a full recovery, but for now the identity of the death worm remains unsolved. But finding anything in the Gobi Desert is always going to be a challenge. Stretching over 500,000 square miles, it's possible there could be countless undocumented species living out there.
Around the world, we're making new discoveries of even large animals every year. New species of birds and mammals and amphibians and reptiles have been found.
Jeff has a hunch of what the death worm might be.
My bet would be that we're dealing with some form of either snake or limbless lizard that occupies this area.
Gobi tribespeople claim the creature has supernatural powers, but some of its more frightening attributes lie well within the natural world.
The notion of spitting venom is certainly not beyond the very attainable realm of possibility. Spitting cobras and other venomous reptiles are known to behave in such fashion.
Even reports the worm can generate electricity may have a simple yet surprising explanation.
Friction of, say, a scaly snake slithering through the sand might be one possible explanation. I mean, much like someone walking across a carpet with rubber-soled shoes on, they're able to generate a fairly sizable discharge.
So a simple venomous snake that builds up a static electric charge as it moves might lie at the heart of this legend.
One always has to first evaluate the more likely explanation, that it's a misidentification of a common animal. But that doesn't rule out the possibility that there's a novel species to be discovered.
It also doesn't rule out the possibility that tales of the worms could have originated from some sort of heat-induced hallucination. Even Ivan Macaulay later accepted this could be true. If this is the case, we may never know. Behind the Iron Curtain, people's everyday lives were controlled in many ways. The Soviet regime tried to repress superstition. But in places like Romania, belief in the supernatural was so strong, it was hard to stamp out. One disturbing case file concerns a Romanian serial killer, but this is no ordinary murderer. Locals believe he's possessed by an evil spirit known as a strigoi. 1970, in the Romanian capital of Bucharest. A killer is at large, preying on young women. His name is Ion Ramaru. Journalist Andrei Masoyu has researched this horrifying case.
He was a student here at the vet school in Bucharest.
But Romaru has a darker side, and at night it's unleashed. On the 4th of April 1970, he commits his first murder.
His victim, a woman, he smashed her head with an object.
Romaru's attacks are particularly savage and barbaric.
There was blood everywhere. He used to bite his victims and take their flesh, their hands or breasts or leg. His actually nickname was Vampire of Bucharest.
Romaru brutally rapes and murders 4 women and seriously injures another 10 before he's finally captured. He's sentenced to death for his crimes. Police doctors suggest mental health problems are to blame, but superstitious locals suspect a different force is at play.
The people were talking, the people were gossip. The rumors spread out.
The vicious nature of his crimes leads some to believe that Romaru is possessed by an evil spirit. Romanian legend tells of such a spirit, the strigoi. Professor Sabina Ispas is an expert on strigoi and Romanian folklore.
They are not like zombie or phantom. They are just energetic power. They have the capacity to become stronger and richer and more powerful, taking the good from the others.
Romanian folklore says it's possible to be born a strigoi. The evil spirit can be passed down from one generation to the next. A powerful act of evil by a parent can directly affect the living spirit of their children. When Ion Romaru is taken for execution, he blames his father for his actions.
He said, I want to leave, my father is to blame for all of this.
Ion Romaru's father is Floria Romaru. A year after his son's execution, Floria dies when he accidentally falls from a train. An investigation yields some disturbing revelations. The father's fingerprints are matched to several horrific murders dating back to 1944. All these murders are similar to those committed by his son. But before Floria could be caught, his son Ion is born, and the murders stop. Rumors spread, suggesting that an evil strigoi spirit had passed from father to son, and that Ion Romaru was born a strigoi. Following his execution, the location of Romaru's grave is kept a secret, even from his family.
No one knows where Ion Romaru is buried. There's so much mystery around this case, so much questions that don't have any answers.
While there's no evidence that Romaru was possessed by a strigoi, people often cling to the supernatural as an explanation for heinous acts. Belief in the strigoi is widespread in Romania. Folklore even tells how to defeat them. More than 30 years ago, a young boy living in southern Romania witnesses a gruesome ceremony to stop a suspected strigoi. His name is Catalin Gria.
One night, I remember that all the village went to the graveyard. They did not care about the little one who, you know, I supposed to be sleeping, but I was not, and I followed the people there.
The villagers are terrified. They believe they are being plagued by an evil strigoi.
So, you see the signs around you. The animals in your house die, or the people in your family or in the village die. So, you see first the problem, the symptoms. So you know there is a strigoi.
According to Romanian folklore, if a dead person is suspected of being the source of a strigoi spirit, they need to undergo a set of rituals to kill the strigoi. The young Catalin witnesses one of these horrific ceremonies at close quarters. A recently deceased body is identified as being the host of the strigoi spirit and is carefully exhumed.
2 men were inside, and around were the women, you know, all dressed in black.
As the corpse is revealed, the villagers' worst fears are confirmed. What they believe is evidence of the strigoi spirit is seen as hideous traces upon the body.
They find the dead man intact. He had his hand bitten and with blood and turned aside. I was terrified.
Catalin is unsure what happened next, but Romanian folklore claims the way to kill a strigoi is with a wooden stake. And garlic. These are desperate measures of a community in fear. They pray it will be enough to put the strigoi to rest. Back in the 1970s, many suspect Ion Romaru of being possessed by a strigoi. Could his body have been acted on to kill the evil spirit? Belief in the power of these demonic spirits dates back hundreds of years. Some researchers think it could be connected with one of Europe's catastrophic plagues, such as the Black Death.
When there is epidemic death, people get very panicky and they like to feel that they have some control, some agency. They like to be able to identify a culprit.
And so the folklore surrounding the strigoi emerged, much of which was absorbed into the Western notion of vampires. As to identifying potential strigoi, many of the markers that are looked for can be explained by the natural processes of a corpse's decomposition.
You can get some quite disgusting stuff like popping and the body changing position. People can look red in the face, they can bloat. People assume that the red around the mouth is the blood from people who've been freshly sucked, rather than the fact that it's actually coming from the decomposing body itself.
There are clearly rational explanations to explain much of the folklore and superstitions surrounding the strigoi. But that does not stop people believing.
If you do something wrong, the strigoi comes and takes your life.
Superstitions are a natural result of the way that we look at the world. The urge to find something, find a perpetrator, to be able to have some kind of ritual that you can perform against it is tremendously satisfying to human beings.
But as long as people see strigoi as a real and present threat, the belief in them will continue.